Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast. One of the hosts here, C.D. Lamb, and asks, grain-free? That's Lenny. I'm Mina Kimes. I'm joined by multiple-time guest, very well-known to anyone who listens to this podcast, one of the hosts of the incredible Around the NFL podcast, fan favorite, Gregg Rosenthal. Welcome back to the show.
So nice. It's good to be back. It's good to be talking football. You really cracked me up with your tweet this week, just talking about NFL, writers just enjoying the quiet as the rest of the world in sports burns.
Yeah, it has been a relatively peaceful period. It usually is. I would say, obviously, that was a joke mostly about the Caitlin Clark debate that is ripping through the worldwide leader and beyond. I would also say that the two big deals that got in this week, Justin Jefferson becoming the highest paid wide receiver, Christian McCaffrey getting an extension and a raise, went to two players who are widely viewed as the best in the league at their positions. So there's nothing to be upset about or debate. The Tua contract looms in the distance, ready to inspire the sort of debate that's been perhaps missing. But those contracts, Greg, to me, are not even really worthy of discussion.
Right. What is there to say? It's like, okay, of course they're going to get paid well. Even the rest of the contracts this year, like Jalen Waddle when he gets paid, or Nico Collins when he gets paid. My son is really getting into like news. He's like, hey, did you see this news? And there's very little to say about it other than just like, that's good. Like teams always keep good players. Move on.
It sounds like your son should replace me on NFL Live because he can get excited for those things. No, I mean, I think the CMC thing is interesting insofar as it kind of raises questions about how they're going to spend the rest of their money, what happens with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, etc. But yeah, for the most part, there's not much to discuss. There is, however, a lot to discuss today, so we should get to it. This is an exercise I do every year. I've been doing it for at least 3 years, where we go through every single team in the NFL, separating by conference. Today we are doing the AFC, and we pick a non-quarterback, non-coach X-Factor. The way I define X-Factor is a player whose performance, availability, whatever, could determine success for that team. And I am specific about that because success can be defined in very different ways. I think when you look across teams, for some, success is winning the Super Bowl. For some, success is winning the division. For some, success is just improving or showing a good play on the part of the rookie quarterback, which is definitely a thing. And some of these picks do end up really becoming like quarterback proxies because we're not allowed to do quarterbacks. But I did choose a lot of players who are not quarterback proxies, players on defense. I can't remember. I don't think you did this one with me last year, if I remember. Did you, baby? Or no, I don't think so.
I feel like I did this once, but it probably wasn't last year.
Okay. Some interesting and difficult choices, I would say.
I have backup plans because sometimes, we think alike. So
it's okay if we think alike.
Yeah, okay. It's not as good.
We're doing the AFC this week, the NFC next week. Just if you're listening to this, you're an NFC fan and you want to hear who your team gets, we will get to your team. We will start with the AFC. Let's start in the AFC East. I immediately joked about doing quarterback proxies for the rookie quarterbacks, but if you draft a rookie quarterback, success to me is success for that rookie quarterback. So we're going to start with the New England Patriots. And the player that I went with is one who I think is very pivotal to the success of Drake May when he plays, and that's Jalen Polk, who immediately becomes the leader of one of the weaker wide receiver groups in the NFL, although it's weaker in the sense of there's not a clear number one. I would argue their 2-3 is actually not that weak. There are players like Kendrick Bourne, KJ Osborne, Tyquan Thornton, Juju Smith-Schuster if he's healthy.
Demario Douglas.
Of course, Demario Douglas, who I like as auxiliary pieces, but so much depends on Jalen Polk. For me, emerging as the number one in this offense, I loved the draft pick. I love him as a player. I love him in particular for Drake May because Drake May, coming out of college, question marks about accuracy, no question marks, however, about aggression and willingness to push the ball down the field. Sometimes in North Carolina, many times to receivers who were not the best. So this is not a guy going from, the LSU offense to whatever. I mean, I'm not talking about Daniels, just generally. But I love Polk as a pick because if you throw it at Jalen Polk, he's probably going to catch it. Incredible catch radius, contested catch ability, strong hands, ability to make difficult catches. So I like the pick for him. Greg, for me, if he has a successful season, that probably means that Drake May also had a successful season.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to ask him to be a number one, but can he be their leading receiver? And because I agree with you, he has the best skill set. They drafted him there for a reason. Although it was a little interesting how they apparently, according to your colleague, and I trust no one more in the sports media than Mike Reese, that they were kind of looking at. It was maybe Xavier Legette, maybe Keon Coleman, and then they ended up trading down out of that. And Polk, to me, is a more exciting pick because I think that's what they need, someone reliable, someone that he can find Drake May and just count on where he's going to be. And maybe when he's making plays up on his own, like who can improvise with him. I did like that he compared Demario Douglas this week, too, to Josh Downs at North Carolina, which I like that. But Polk seems to me like the most likely guy to lead them in receiving.
Who was your choice?
Okay, so I'm going, and maybe I didn't totally understand this exercise, but I'm going Christian Gonzalez. And I think he's an X factor just because there's some Patriots fans who look at him and think, oh, wow, well, we have our number one cornerback, like he's locked and loaded. There's others, I think it's fair to say it's like he played 4 games. 2 of them were incredible. His game against Miami was just outrageous. But I kind of look at it in terms of helping Drake May. Their defense needs to help Drake May. And this just is a team without a ton of difference makers. Like as good even as the defense is and deep as it is, like who are the stars on this team? Who are the potential all pros on this team? I think about Christian Barmore, and then I think about Christian Gonzalez. And to me, he's an X factor. I have a lot of cornerbacks in general because I just feel like they're so up and down. And if you get top shelf cornerback play, if Christian Gonzalez is really that dude, to me, it changes their whole defense.
Well, the defense is an interesting place to go to because despite the injuries, despite the loss, I think they had the most adjusted games lost of any defense of the NFL, if I remember correctly, if not the most, certainly up there. Losing both Gonzalez and Matthew Judon, who's the best pass rusher. And yet they still finished as a top 10, top 5 defense in certain metrics, which is unbelievable. Speaks to both, I think, some of the underrated talent they have, particularly in the spine of the defense. And also, of course, the fact that they had the greatest defensive play caller in the NFL, who is no longer the head coach of the New England Patriots. And that's, I think, sort of an underplayed storyline about this team, perhaps.
They do have a Belichick, though. I mean, if that's not the most awkward thing in the league, that like not the second best Belichick coach. He's at UW, but the third best Belichick is still on the roster. So we got him.
We'll find out. We'll get a better sense of not just that, but how much Gerard Mayo, of course, was responsible for that defense. He coached linebackers, too. I've always thought the linebacker play of the Patriots has been something to marvel at. And obviously, he was really highly thought of in the building, right? Because apparently, unbeknownst to the world, he was the head coach successor all along. But so anyways, I say that to get to my point, which is I think you make a good point about Gonzalez, because if he is truly that shutdown number one corner that he showed at times, the Miami game certainly is the one that comes to mind, that will make this transition a hell of a lot easier as opposed to being something that they, have to game plan around. And it also, I think, is the best case for this team having at least an above average record. I think their win total is something like unbelievably low, like below 5, maybe even something I saw. I was a little bit shocked given how good this defense has been. So whether or not they can sustain that level of play will probably come from the play they get. I would say from Gonzalez and Judon are the two players. Okay. Elsewhere in the AFC East, who do you have for the Miami Dolphins?
Okay. For Miami, I'm
I have kind of a hipster
discombobulated here. So this is a tricky one. It could be Teron Armstead every year.
Yeah.
Is that yours? And that's
no. I have a hipster pick.
Oh, okay. Like it's obvious because Teron Armstead just never plays 17 games. They know he's not going to play 17 games, and yet he's still so worth it when he's out there that they still give him all the money in the world. He's also like an X factor because he's heavily featured on the Madden soundtrack, which again, like, plays too often in my car, not by my choice, but like, they're just a different team. And I almost use him as a proxy for the entire offensive line, which I know you've talked about a lot. And Tua helps mitigate their shortcomings in pass protection by getting rid of the ball. And they're pretty good but man, they're pushing it in terms of the overall talent. And so getting 13 games out of Teron Armstead to me would be huge.
So I also went with the offensive line, but I went with Aaron Brewer, who's their center. Part because I actually think they have some tackle depth now. Kendall Lamb, I thought, filled in reasonably well. They drafted Patrick Paul in the second round. He is tackle. Whereas on the interior, there's a lot of change. Robert Hunt, who's gone, who was arguably, after Armstead, their best offensive lineman. He was paid commensurately. Connor Williams tore his ACL. We'll see if he can return and if they bring him back. Isaiah Wynn, they did bring back. But Brewer, to me, is a guy where, like, there's not a lot of depth behind him. I guess Liam Eichenberg maybe is behind him. And when I think about Tua and I think about how quickly he gets rid of the ball and the nature of this timing-based offense, quick pressure up the interior would seem to be the way that a game plan could get wrecked. And so if Brewer is a total disaster at center, that might actually cause some problems for them.
They gave him a lot of money. I mean, they sneaky spent a lot of money. They just spread it out in a bunch of surprising places. I kind of like their offseason. I feel like the Dolphins do that a lot, where they make a lot of signings that sound pretty good in a vacuum. It's a lot to ask, like 7 guys to come in and all contribute. Some of them won't work, but he got a sneaky amount of money, Aaron Brewer.
The Buffalo Bills, there was a lot of guys who I feel like you could have gone with this. I went with Dalton Kincaid.
Okay. I have a similar-ish pass catcher, Curtis Samuel.
Yeah. Ooh. Now you have the hipster pick. No, I think when I think about how do you replace Diggs' production, I think that's actually the wrong way to look at this offense, because Diggs was not a big producer last year at the second half of the season after Joe Brady took over. I think a lot of that had to do with the nature of the offense, which went much more leaned. So I went on. It's called Disguised Coverage. Is Cover One. It's a Bills podcast. Excellent. You guys can check it out. I'll tweet it out. And we talked at length about the Bills offense. And to prep for that, I looked at all of the splits before and after the coordinator change. Mm-hmm. And it's like a fascinating piece of data, because the offense was arguably more efficient in some ways before, but the biggest change you noticed afterwards was that there's a few changes. One, Josh Allen just ran more, which is obviously something that they do later in the season. They learned a lot more on screens. That's how they used Diggs a bit more. That was the biggest change. And then they ran the ball incredibly well before. They ran the ball incredibly well after, but they leaned into the run way more, which checks out for anyone who watched the Bills in the second half of the season. You never really got to see that sort of 12 personnel heavy offense that we expected to, because Dawson Knox was hurt, and obviously for a tight end, aside from the Sam Laporta season kind of overshadowed, it takes a second, right? For me, I think the next iteration of this Bills offense, I'll get into it in more detail when I talk about top 10 offenses, spoiler, is an offense that has both of those tight ends on the field and is able to lean more into making the run and the pass look alike, kind of like what we thought they might be when they drafted Kincaid. So I think if he can take that leap and be that mismatch player that was that they hoped when they drafted him, I feel like that would be a way for the Bills to compensate for what is on paper a little bit of a dubious receiving group.
Yeah, I think they have enough receivers, but he has the best chance to break out and has shown the most talent. It was a very surprising take to me. I've heard some people have been kind of disappointed with Dalton Kincaid's rookie year, and I don't know, especially late in the year, the flashes were there that you were like, wow, this is going to happen. And the production was there. He's literally, his season last year was in the top 10 just in yardage of any tight end in the history of the NFL. which I don't think people would really imagine, but that's just how the tight end position works. Like, it was a ton of receptions. It wasn't as many big plays as you would expect, but I think you can create that. I think it's obvious that he can make big plays. Curtis Samuel probably won't make as many. Maybe that is a hipster pick. I will never give up Curtis Samuel. This team needs help, obviously. I think James Cook is going to catch a lot of balls. Like, Kincaid's going to catch a lot of balls. We'll see about Keon Coleman. I think they have enough. But Samuel, to me, is underrated. He is one of the league leaders every year in my own, like, gets more yards than you expect on a terrible play metric. I just feel like Curtis Samuel always gets to 8 when it should have been 4. It was like some terrible schemed up play, and Curtis Samuel does more than you think. And he's also like the new Sammy Watkins. He's somehow only 27 years old. Like, no matter how long Sammy Watkins stayed in the league, he always stayed very young. And yeah, Samuel is 27 years old.
No.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's one of those where he's turning 28 this summer. I think he's like 27 most of the year off the top of my head. But like, let's go Curtis Samuel. I like Curtis Samuel.
The Robert Quinn of offense. Yes. That's crazy. 27. I would have guessed 30s. That's wild. When you mentioned Samuel, I just think about how good Josh Allen was at throwing to Cole Beasley. Like, we talk a lot about Stephon Diggs and the role he played in Allen's development and evolution as a passer, but one thing that I believe Josh Allen has already shown is that willingness to play patiently, work underneath, particularly against too high coverage. It's not something like we have yet to see from him. We have already seen it. So I have to think Samuel could potentially be important there, especially because I believe Khalil Shakir is like a true field stretching weapon as well. So they have guys like spatially, it makes sense, different pieces. I guess, yeah, for me, Kincaid is just, he jumps out on paper as the most talented, and I agree with you about. I think it's just the Laporta season kind of overshadowed his.
It was a slow start too. He didn't produce too much until Dawson Knox got hurt, but it happens.
Okay, who do you have for the New York Jets?
All right, I'm gonna go Mike Williams, their free agent signing, which I think was a good value. You just have to kind of look at like the Chargers. They were just a completely different team without Mike Williams. There's just so few guys that are ball winners like that deep down the field and is that physical. And yet they might get very little out of Mike Williams. There's no way to know how he is going to be considering the injuries he's had in the past. He's had the back issues, and now he's coming off a torn ACL. Like, maybe he's going to be fine. Maybe he's going to be almost like a number 1B to Garrett Wilson, or maybe they get very little out of him. So to me, like, that is a huge just compounding factor of their offense. If he gets going, then they're going to be very tough to stop.
I also have Mike Williams. It's our first handshake pick. For a few reasons. If they hadn't drafted Olu Fashanu, I probably would have gone with Tyron Smith but now that they actually have depth at offensive tackle, that made me a little bit more comfortable moving off of that, because I mean, obviously the best version of this team is Tyron Smith playing all 17 games and beyond. Success for the Jets is a Super Bowl run, honestly. But they have some depth there. Whereas at wide receiver, while yes, Garrett Wilson is the obvious number 1, the best offenses in the NFL, and again, success for this offense is, I don't think this Jet season is successful unless they have a top 10 offense. I guess I should start there to pair with their already top 10 defense. That is, for me, to reach that level, you have to have 2 really good wide receivers, especially if you don't have great tight ends, which they don't. So I think back to, like you said, the Chargers offense and when it looked really unstoppable and successful, and it was always when Mike Williams was on the field alongside Keenan Allen. They made it work without him because they often had to. But when he is on the field, he is such a nightmare against man coverage on third down, wins at all 3 levels. And when you think about defenses having to play to account for both him and Wilson, that's when you start to get scared. When you take him out of the equation, it feels more manageable. It still will be a million times better, obviously, than last year, but it's not. It's hard for me to imagine it being like truly great unless they get healthy Mike Williams. So.
Yeah, playing with Keenan Allen is great, but Garrett Wilson is just a whole nother animal at this part of his career. So that's only going to help Mike Williams. Yeah,
similar. You could see them using similar concepts with both of them, though, to when Keenan Allen was a little bit younger. And okay. Let's do the AFC South next. Let's start with the Jags. I'll go first. I'm picking, I think, is this my first rookie? Oh, no, I had Polk. Okay, well, I'm doing another one. A player that you are unbelievably high on. So this is really just kind of like a way for you to talk about him in some ways. But Brian Thomas Jr. is my pick because I think success for the Jags, obviously probably winning the division, whatever, but you got to see Trevor Lawrence looking more like the Trevor Lawrence you saw first half of last season at times, but really the second half of the prior season is what comes to mind. And, the Jags offense struggled at times for a litany of reasons. It was kind of, when I watching them, to me, it wasn't not just one thing. Some of it was on Lawrence and his decision making. A lot of it was on the offensive line. So you could definitely go in that direction. But a lot of it I felt was the fact that defenses did not actually seem worried about this receiving group, which obviously battled injuries, Christian Kirk missing a lot of the season. But one thing that really stuck out is just how tight it looked at times and how little defenses feared the deep ball. And this actually, two things that shocked me. One, the Jags faced the highest rate of loaded boxes in the NFL last year. More than the Falcons, more than the Ravens, which...
A lot of two tight ends, I guess. That's part of it, but that's surprising.
And then the other thing is I was looking at separation stats. So separation is a little bit tricky because you got to take out screens can, obviously, and throws behind the line of scrimmage to the flats. So on throws over 10 yards, so taking that all out, the Jags ranked 30th in separation. Enter Brian Thomas Jr., who is pretty much separation in human form. So to me, he has the potential to truly solve some of the issues that we saw plague this offense last year.
Yeah, I thought he was closer to the top 3 receivers in the draft than he was given credit for. We'll see. I get that he had a relatively limited route tree, or he did have a limited route tree in college, but guys can get better. And DK Metcalf is a great example, and a different player, but maybe a sort of model of how I think Brian Thomas Jr. can improve as a pro. It just seemed obvious to me, and I might be wrong, that what he does sells. What he does will track. He just moves in a way that people his size just don't move. And I don't just mean a burner down the field. I mean his lateral agility and how he moves with the ball in his hands. That's not how he's going to win, but he's not a stiff. And I love it. They almost overcorrected. I mean, him and Gabe Davis to me are a little redundant, but they are fast as hell. Those two guys, and Travis Etienne and even Evan Ingram for a tight end. I mean, that is team speed. And anyone that's been a little annoyed that Trevor doesn't go for it deep. I don't think guys were necessarily open deep, and he didn't have those type of receivers. If he doesn't do it this year, then we can get annoyed by it.
But you looked so shocked when I said that loaded box stat that I actually was I'm going to check and make sure.
I don't know. That seems so surprising that, Travis Etienne.
They did run the ball a heavy amount too, which I think influenced that. But a lot of it, to me, it looks so tight at times. Anyways, did you go offensive line?
No, I went with Trayvon Walker. Maybe I was inspired by our friend Nate Tice, who sent out an awesome Trayvon Walker rep against the Bucs last, and I was like, wow, Trayvon, is he big on Trayvon Walker now? So I decided, let's go back, let's watch some Trayvon Walker, because the numbers were good, weirdly, in terms of his sacks, and even QB hits were okay, I believe. But he was 105th out of 121 in PFF. The run defense, actually, he made a lot of mistakes. His win rate was very bad. The underlying numbers weren't great. So let's watch some Trayvon Walker. I haven't done it since he was a rookie, but since he was, coming out in the draft. And I don't know, I wasn't impressed. But I do think that makes him an X factor. I'm not trying to pick it's going to happen. I just think he is the person that they could really use. He's the number 1 overall pick. And if he was right. And it's funny because if he was the 16th overall pick, he still wouldn't be a great pick, I don't think. But it'd be funny how we talk about him, because watching him, he's a high motor guy. I mean, it's not an effort thing. Those sacks, the plays that he makes, he sometimes does blow up the run and has great push. I mean, he has power, and when he faces a second or third stringer especially, sometimes he just pushes them off their spot, and you're like, wow, that's Trayvon Walker, that's awesome. But he just doesn't seem like he knows what to do, what he's doing in terms of pass rush playing. And even the run defense, like the good plays seem to be negated by plays where he's not on the same page with the rest of his team. So like I didn't see much on tape, but he's entering his third year. We knew he was going to be raw. If they could get him to be a real second rusher, that would be huge for them because they really don't have a third. It's a thin position for them.
Yeah, and a pass rush that really faded off at times in big games. New defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen.
I think that'll help.
Yep, a lot of I thought had a great year with Atlanta, working with significantly less talent at pass rush. So we'll see. I'm not super high on him, honestly, based on what we've seen the first 2 years, but that could change. We'll see. And I think this defense, I think it's a good choice because I don't think this defense will really take a leap unless they get someone other than Josh Allen to get after the quarterback. Okay, the Colts. Who do you have? You go first.
All right. I went with Josh Downs. It might have been because I watched so much
I love Josh Downs.
Drake May tape, and I was just like, oh, yeah, Drake May was so much better with Josh Downs, and Josh Downs was so good. And then I watched some Richardson tape this offseason, too. It's like the first completion of Anthony Richardson's career, Josh Downs. Like the first big-time throw, this seam ball that Josh Downs makes a great catch on, Josh Downs. And he gets open. He gets wide open in short areas. Like he was a guy that Minshew really often found when he was just doing the Minshew thing where he was just scrambling around hoping someone could make a play for him, and the guy made a play. Rookie that had 73 catches for 810 yards, and you just see the suddenness, and you see a few more plays downfield than I would have expected, which would have been very little. I saw enough where I'm like, okay, he can hold up when it's dialed up and he's open. It works. I just think he's almost a little underrated because of his size, that he can be a really good 2 in this league, and I think that's a huge win for a third-round pick.
Yeah, I went with Pittman Jr. A lot of the same sort of thinking in regards to what we want to see out of Richardson. And both of these players, both Downs and Pittman, I think are guys who can be extremely like reliable targets. Both have great hands. I think Downs has better hands than actually you saw his rookie season. So I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a leap in that regard because he was really good at getting open. And with Richardson, small, obviously very small sample size with him. Talked about him a little bit with Nate Tice, who's very high on him. There was a lot to like from the beginning, but it was very obvious he still needs to work on his accuracy, short, intermediate, completing less than 60% of his passes, which is a non-tenable number. So that has to go up. So I just went with Pittman because I think of Pittman to me is like that classic, like works the intermediate part of the field guy, digs, comebacks, and a reasonably large target for Richardson. And if they can develop that chemistry, I think that's probably this is a little bit of proxy pick for like, okay, Richardson has become, the guy that you want him to be if you're the Colts. But either of those guys would work. I mean, I kind of like this Colts receiving group. I've talked about it a bit. I like how it's coming together. I like the complementary skill sets. And I'm actually really, really excited to watch the Colts offense this year.
Colts Texans week 1, like that was the game of all the games. I'm like, wow, Colts Texans is weirdly the game I want to watch the most. Maybe, and maybe that's too hipster, but definitely on that Sunday, I'm like Stroud Richardson right now. That to me is beautiful.
Let's do the Texans. I'll go first on this one. I actually thought the Texans are such a sneaky stacked team that it's actually kind of hard. I felt that they were so stacked offensively that I kind of was looking at the offensive side and thinking, you could take this guy out and this would be fine. Defense is where I decided to go. And I went with a player who I think has been overlooked a little bit, and that's Derek Stingley Jr. He's really good. I think it's been he's probably because of the injury, because of the play of Sauce Gardner, who's obviously taken not long after him. I think he has flown a little bit under the radar. I think he has the potential, and this could be the year where he really emerges as one of the true number one shutdown corners in the NFL. Last year, cornerback stats are always a little hard to parse out, but 4th lowest passer rating, 4th lowest EPA per target, 1st in Next Gen Stats Hawk rating, 32%, which is the percentage of targets where the nearest defender makes a play on the football. And part of the reason I went with him, Greg, is I've talked about this with regards to DeMeco Ryans' defense. They're trending in the direction of becoming the Niners defense to me, the way they play, the style, some of the schematic tendencies. And the best version of that defense is if he can be like, the Charvarius Ward of the Texans defense. And I really think he can, which would make this defense really fearsome. And they're sort of trending in that direction for me.
I mean, he just passes the eye test. I mean, obviously good ball skills for a cornerback, but just so physical. And I think played with way more confidence down the stretch. That's a great pick because they're thin at corner a little. Like that to me is the weakness of their team. Whoever's lining up across from him, and maybe it's Jeff Okudah. I don't know who it's gonna wind up being, but if he's dominant, that helps out a lot. I went on the defense too. I'm beginning to think I went too many hipster picks. I didn't understand the exercise, but I went Aziz Al-Shahir. Let's go here.
No, it's a great pick. It was my second choice on the defense.
Okay, same. I wrote down Stingley
for similar reasons to, by the way, what I said about Stingley and the Niners defense. So
exactly. That's it. When Al-Shahir played in San Francisco, it was like, wow, is this guy one of the best linebackers in the league? And you kind of know, okay, he's probably not. It's about the defense too, but he's so physical. There was a lot of redundancies with him and Dre Greenlaw, and Dre Greenlaw is amazing. So you didn't need both of them. I get why he got more money. I thought he held up well, and I talked to people in Tennessee about it too last year. That defense had a lot of issues. He's not like an amazing coverage linebacker, but he was very steady for them. They were happy with him. They were hoping to get him back, and I think he was really happy to rejoin DeMeco Ryans. Because if you look at what Ryans did last year with the linebackers that were there too, like he got Blake Cashman paid. Like he made Christian Harris play a lot better than he did with other coaches. So he really can coach up linebackers.
I was gonna say, if there's one guy in the NFL I trust to coach up linebackers and also choose good linebackers, it would be DeMeco Ryans. Yeah, and again, to kind of go back to what is success? Success for the Texans is a deep playoff run, which is contingent upon this pass defense in particular improving.
You know what success is for me is I got to talk about Aziz Al-Shahir for like a minute on ESPN too. Everyone watch.
I feel like the Titans is easy. If J.C. Latham isn't good, you can just write this off, man. Like, because this offense will be non-functional unless they get a dramatic improvement in the play of the offensive line. It was very, very troubling last season. Great wide receiver group, deep wide receiver group. They're talking about Treylon Burks being a gunner now. We're looking at Latham, Skoronski, Cushenberry, Brunskill, and then either Dylan Redence or Nicholas Petit-Frere. Latham was, of course, the first-round draft pick this season. And I feel like there's a lot to like out of Will Levis, but his ability to sense pressure is not one of his greatest attributes. Mm-hmm. So if Latham is good, and some people think he can be like a true stud, I don't know enough to make a projection there, then I think that will go a long way towards making this offense workable.
Well, and he's got a great offensive line coach. I mean, that can change everything. That was the number one thing about hiring Brian Callahan to me, was he got to bring his dad, and suddenly the talent that was there. Now, look, it's a lot of new talent. Cushenberry is new there too and should be great, but I just have so much more faith that Bill Callahan is going to get these guys playing at their best, because he just always does. And that's going to make my pick look better. Tajay Spears, I got to go Tulane.
Green Wave.
He was so good, though. Come on. Okay, top 15 in yards after contact per carry. Top 5 in PFF's elusive rating. And his feet just move so quick. And when he makes a decision, he goes. He is the style of running back that I love the most, that can make people miss in a small area and kind of get 7 when it was going to be 3, and is really good on receiving downs and was excellent as a pass catcher. Like, his skills as a pass catcher partly won them that wild game against Miami. There were a lot of like negative plays too. Like, his numbers are good, and yet he has so many negative 4s where he's tackled instantly because the run defense, the run blocking was so bad in Tennessee. Derrick Henry ran into that. I just think he's going to be a good 1A. I think he's more complete than Tony
1A?
Pollard. He'd be a guy I'd be excited about in fantasy too. I just think he's got a lot of talent.
The Pollard pick made me feel weird about him, though, because I was like, why would you take a guy with a fairly duplicative skill set I didn't understand it. That doesn't
Because you need two backs. I get it. Yeah, I think you always need two backs now, and you'd rather give Tajay Spears 275 touches instead of 350. So it's like 275 and 200, or maybe that's too many.
I do like them. I do like them both in fantasy because of the aforementioned wide receivers. Even if J.C. Latham isn't great, they will be running into certainly better situations than the hellhole that was the Titans.
And he's a good inside runner. You think of him as like the scat back, but no, he breaks tackles. He runs inside well.
All right, let's take a quick break, come back, and let's do the AFC North next.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words, Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire.
We're back. Let's start with the Bengals. Haven't talked much Bengals. You can go first here.
Okay. I had 2 options. I really couldn't choose, but now I'm going to have to. I'm going to go Logan Wilson, who most famously got called for a holding that may or may not have been a holding and may have affected the Super Bowl result. He was a big disappointment last year. They gave him a huge contract going into last year. I think they thought, look, a 3-down linebacker is the hardest thing to find that's good in coverage in the NFL. And him and Jermaine Pratt were maybe the biggest issues they had on the team. I mean, certainly the secondary wasn't great either, but they had a bad year as a tandem, so I'm kind of picking them both. But Wilson's the guy who has the big money, struggled in coverage. I think when you look at a lot of the defenses that really disappointed, you can look at the linebackers struggling. And I make him an X factor because we've seen him play at a really high level that wasn't there a year ago. And so if he can get back to that, to me, that stabilizes a lot in their defense.
I think also the linebacker position is of utmost importance in that particular division because you're probably playing 3 very play action heavy offenses. And then the division winner, the Ravens make life very difficult for linebackers, both on the ground and through the air. The Bengals pass defense, I know you're right that linebacker was an issue, but the entire back 7 was just, I feel like the meltdown flew under the radar because of Joe Burrow's injury, but it would have been a major issue down the stretch. Actually, the funny thing is the offense actually continued to play at like a really decently high level with Jake Browning,
man.
But the defense was the problem. Ranked near the bottom of the NFL a number of metrics. One that really jumped out to me, they allowed 35 catches over 20 yards, which was the worst mark in the NFL. They also allowed 8.1 yards per attempt, which was the worst in the NFL. Sticking with the spine, I'm going with Geno Stone, who was the safety they signed from their division rival in Baltimore. So Bengals fans, of course, know they let Jesse Bates walk. He was amazing in Atlanta. Von Bell returns. That's fine, but in terms of a free safety who can stop those deep catches, Geno Stone was fantastic for Baltimore. And it wasn't just small sample size theater. Like, he played a lot for the Ravens. And obviously had some really fun interceptions, but it wasn't just the interceptions. I thought he was really quite good in coverage. And this ends the Dax Hill safety experiment. He is moving back to cornerback. I think, that the improvement you can get on the back end will really go a long way towards making this defense at least average, which is what it needs to be if the offense can go back to what they were with Joe Burrow. Okay. I might surprise you with my pick for the Ravens.
Okay, you go first then, because I don't think mine's that surprising.
I'm going with Justin Madubuike.
Okay.
So I am actually more confident in the Ravens offense versus the Ravens defense. Start there. It is defense that has had not just some talent walk out the door. I mentioned Stone, Patrick Queen, Jadeveon Clowney, but also, of course, the loss of their coordinator, several defensive coaches. To me, Madubuike is important because while he was incredible last year, 15 sacks, 19 quarterback hits, before then, while he was a good player, he never came close to that mark. So he had this career year at exactly the right time, and he got a big contract. So much of what they do structurally on defense is based on basically this incredible play up the spine. We know about their safety group, Kyle Hamilton, linebacker, you still have Roquan Smith. To me, Madubuike still has to play at like a very high level for this defense to be anything close to what we saw last year. I think he can. And the other thing is he plays a lot, man. Like they rotate pass rushers, all the, he had 849 snaps, which was the most, unsurprisingly, on the Ravens defensive line. They have a bunch of depth at nose. He is kind of I think Roquan Smith is the key, the straw that stirs the drink. But I think Madubuike is pivotal to that pass rush.
Yeah, you make a great point that he wasn't that guy before. If he was that guy, the Ravens would have paid him a year ago and saved themselves some money because they are a forward-thinking organization like that. And I believe there were brief talks and they just weren't anywhere near where he wanted at the time. And then he paid off. The good point in their favor is defensive tackles lately have just developed late. Like the great ones tend to take till year 3, year 4, year 5, and most of them have been sticking. Like if you look at all the biggest contracts at the position, like Dexter Lawrence and Chris Jones and Christian Wilkins, like players like that, it was a slow build. And Madubuike was maybe even a little slower. But once they got to that level of physicality, they stuck. I have a guy, which they're hoping has that sort of bump, but they'll be protected financially. It's Rashad Bateman. Look, the Rashad Bateman hype train, the belief train has been wild this offseason. Like, how surprised have you been that, like, we love Rashad Bateman and we're going to show it in multiple ways has been, like, a consistent storyline with the Ravens all offseason?
It's been interesting. Obviously, he did get a contract extension, which was very reasonable. Start there.
Very.
He has not lived up to what I had hoped he would be out of college, but I would argue that that's mostly because of injuries, and he's just had he gets a little bit of momentum, and you're feeling good about him, and then it's like a setback, or OBJ gets some of those targets at times. Talk about why you think his success is so important to this offense.
Well, because they're thin at wide receiver. Like, Zay Flowers is year 1 here, and Bateman's year 2, and it's the offensive line has quite. I don't have any question about Lamar and the play calling, and you figure the offensive line is going to work it out. But everything else, there kind of are a lot of the questions that Lamar's had throughout. Now, you have a young player in Zay Flowers that gets better. Hopefully, Mark Andrews is healthy. But Bateman is that dude that can be an outside receiver. I'm not saying he needs to get like 1,200 yards, but I just found the storyline very interesting. They have that press conference 3 days after the season ends every year with Harbaugh and DeCosta. It's like State of the Ravens. And one of the things they were like is like, next year's a huge year for Rashad Bateman. We believe in Rashad Bateman so much. And I was like, whoa, they're really leading with this in January. And then they signed him to that contract. There's some weird particulars to that he wasn't eligible for a 5th-year option because he hadn't reported for training camp one time. But they got a total bargain out of it. And then they showed it with their actions that they didn't really bring in any competition. They also showed it with their actions by giving him double the snaps of Odell Beckham in the playoffs. Like, he was out there. He didn't make a ton of plays in the playoffs, but he was out there a lot more than Beckham. So I do believe that they believe in him. And I think, reading between the lines, they also thought it was a bit of maybe a maturity issue coming into the league, that they feel like he is more professional, wants it more, and works at it more, and really do believe in him. And I think they think that they might have gotten a huge bargain with that contract.
I mean, they really need size and strength at that position.
Yeah.
So, which he has. I mean, he's not gigantic, but he's over 6 feet, I believe, and has physicality to his game, and should be able to do some of the dirty work that you assume Flowers can't. I think the best version of this offense is one where he is, if not a star, at least a solid contributor, which is how they're paying him. And if he's not, if he's hurt,
I mean, he's going to have to play like 900 snaps.
Yeah.
He has to on this roster if he's healthy.
That's a good pick. For the Pittsburgh Steelers,
Mm-hmm.
I also went wide receiver. I went George Pickens. And the reason I went Pickens is, regardless of who's playing quarterback, whether it's Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, if this offense is successful, one would think Pickens is a huge beneficiary, because Russell Wilson and Justin Fields have kind of similar profiles in a lot of ways, similar weaknesses, but also similar strengths. They're both very good at throwing the ball deep. George Pickens, of course, one of the best deep targets in the NFL. For the last 2 years, 35% of his catches have gone for over 20 yards, which is the most of any receiver in the league. He has a less than 2% drop rate on throws over 20 yards, which is, if you watch George Pickens, checks out. He has to be the best friend of either of those guys. I don't even care, whichever one. And also, they both like throwing deep outside the numbers, which is, again, where he thrives.
Right. He is such a unique talent. I remember ranking him. I think I had him second in that class, which was like too high now in retrospect. But if he could pull it all together, I feel stupid that he was ahead of Garrett Wilson. It's but he's shown the flashes. And look, if Mitch, like you said, it was 35% of his catches or whatever. It's like almost 100% of those it felt like were from Mitch Trubisky. So if Mitch slinging it deep can get it done, I think Justin Fields and Russ can. And again, there's not a lot of competition. So it's can he handle that sort of attention in that sort of role? That's a lot to ask.
Who'd you go with?
I went with Broderick Jones, the first round tackle that they took last year. I'm not like a offensive line expert, but man, that guy can steamroll people. That guy can pull. And it's pretty rare that you put a guy into your lineup and the offense literally changes. They were 24th in rushing EPA before he started, 8th after. And it's less about just the production. It's just watching it. They just started calling way more pulling runs, and it worked great. They have two good backs in Jaylen Warren, especially 8, but Najee Harris did too. And then you think about pairing him with Fautanu, like what a great match. And I think a great match for Arthur Smith too. They could be really fun to watch in terms of their running game. And to me, he'll be a huge part of that.
Yeah, it's kind of similar where regardless of who's playing quarterback, like I talked about, George Pickens is the beneficiary of those quarterback strengths. Broderick Jones has to cover up for both those quarterbacks' weaknesses, which is they take zillion sacks and hold on to the football. Maybe they'll get better. Maybe Justin Fields in particular, we'll see if he gets better at that, if he gets a chance to play. But it's good. It's a good pick too, because it's it doesn't, for both of those guys, I think he's going to have to be good. And of course, I think we all expect this to be a very run-centric offense that sort of builds a little bit on the identity that you alluded to. All right, AFC West.
We got the Browns still.
Oh, wait. Oh, sorry, Browns fans. I actually went to an outside source for this one.
Ooh.
I asked for our friend, Andrew Siciliano, Browns super fan. Basically, I asked him this question. I want to pick someone on the Browns offensive line. Who would you pick?
So did I, though. Let's see if we both picked
So my instinct was to go with Wills because he was the biggest
That was my pick. I went with a lot of guys.
Yeah, guys. It's a good pick. It's a reasonable one. The reason I went with the Browns offensive line is because we saw Deshaun Watson struggle so much under pressure. So the idea is if they can return to their high level of play, that would go a long way towards him playing decently. He's just a Conklin, from Jack Conklin, just because he is the one of Jedrick Wills, DeJuan Jones, who played decently well. But Jack Conklin, when he's healthy, has been an absolute superstar at times. So if he could come back and be a superstar, is the thinking, this offensive line could look kind of like what we expect them to be.
And it's a serious injury, so there's a little more. You don't know what you're going to get the second time he's going through that big of a recovery. He's older now. I almost have been a little surprised how well this contract worked out for the Browns. I think they gave him another one too. I think he's on his third veteran contract, because the Titans were a little anxious because of his injury history back when Cleveland originally signed him, and it's worked out. And so, yeah, I'm with you. Wills is similar to me, just that, look, some people had him as the top tackle in that draft, which had Andrew Thomas in it, which had Wirfs in it, which had Becton in it too. And he played pretty well as a rookie and just he's talked about it too. He's just like, I just haven't been as good since I was a rookie, and there's not like one thing you could put a finger on it, but it's a contract year for him, and it would just be massive for them to get improved play because of what you said with Watson too.
All right. AFC West, wrapping here. I picked another offensive lineman for the Kansas City Chiefs. I went with Wanya Morris. I don't know if there's a leader in the clubhouse right now at left tackle, but I am between him and Sua Mantaya.
It's got to be Wanya Morris.
I would think it would be Wanya Morris.
Played, but yeah.
I am adhering to a principle that I believe is very it's time tested. And listen, at this point, we're in year 7 of Patrick Mahomes, really year 6. I think it is a very concrete principle, which is that as long as he is upright, he will be fine. Left tackle is the single biggest question on this team, in my opinion. You could go defense there. I'll see if you do, and there's some issues there. But if Donovan Smith is still out there right now, given the additions in particular that they made on offense, the speed that they added at receiver with Hollywood Brown, and of course Xavier Worthy, their first-round draft pick, all Patrick Mahomes needs is time. So when I think about this team, success is, of course, winning the Super Bowl again. And if Morris can not even like excel out the gate, but just be good at the end of the season, I would feel a hell of a lot better about their chances.
Yeah.
A hell of a lot better. I'd feel good about it. I still already feel good about their chances.
Right. It's weird Donovan Smith still unsigned. I mean,
I
starting in that Super Bowl. I'm remembering that angle I had, right? Yeah, he's the one out there. Like, and he was okay. Left tackle was their worst position, I would say, last year too. And they survived it. They would love for one of these young guys to step up. But it always helps when you have an interior line that's that good that they can send extra help and not feel like they're compromising the rest of the line, whether it's the tight ends or whatever, to help out that left tackle. If you only have one trouble spot, and I think that's probably where they're at, then better spot.
If you have a quarterback who's so good at sack avoidance and also stepping up and making plays while stepping up rather than escaping out the outside. Who's your pick for the Chiefs?
All right. I chose a tandem. Like, what percentage of NFL fans do you think know, like, who Jalen Watson or Joshua Williams are?
It's
like,
really confusing because of their names, I would argue, too, because they sound like an amalgamation of names of other players on the team. There's, like, a bunch of guys with kind of similar names that make it confusing.
And
it's correct, though.
They're also, like, day 3 picks. Yeah. You know, one's from an HBCU. The other one is a 7th-round pick. But that's like the assembly line in Kansas City. It's just like, oh, let's go give Spags like a 5th rounder that's tougher than you think, and he'll just be playing 30 awesome snaps in the Super Bowl.
Crank up the difficulty level.
Like back-to-back years. And that's what these guys have done. And I looked, I was like, who's the leader in the clubhouse here? Like, I think PFF, now I'm going to forget it, I think had Williams ranked really well in terms of their coverage grades last year. Watson, to me, flashed a little more, and they split the snaps between those two very evenly in the playoffs, where they were both playing 25 to 30 snaps. So neither one was like a starter. But this year, they should get more work with L'Jarius Sneed going. And it's just like part of the secret sauce with this team that they have these, I was going to say kids, like they are kids. I mean, on rookie contracts, day 3 contracts that step in and play like well. And both of them had like really good moments, and usually you get better under Steve Spagnuolo by the time you get to year 3.
That's like their secret sauce, right? That no one's taking away Spagnuolo. And I mean, Chris Jones is the right choice. And I say that I think if the Chiefs are not successful in January, we will look back at them not keeping L'Jarius Sneed, I think, as a big factor. He was incredible down the stretch. But I feel a lot better about the prospects of these young players, part because we've seen them. It's not just like, who is this guy? Like, they played in big games. And they've played, I think, outside. It's funny because I feel like when people talk about L'Jarius Sneed leaving, sometimes you get, well, they still have Trent McDuffie. McDuffie's a nickel, y'all. Like, that's his best, alignment. Like, they need someone who could play outside, particularly against teams like Dolphins. And I think having, though, a good 4-man rush helps a lot. I thought Karlaftis was really great last year, so that should help in that regard. But yeah, so much of what they did on defense was based on having Sneed be that press shutdown guy on the outside. So it makes sense. Cornerback is definitely other than left tackle, was the other biggest area of need. I really had trouble with the Broncos, so I'm making you go first.
I did too. This is the most random pick I made, which was Riley Moss. It's like before Cooper DeJean came along, we had the hope of the first starting white cornerback in a while in Riley Moss, and I just am looking at the roster and I'm like, in reading the articles in the offseason, it's just like they think this dude's going to start, and he was injured as a rookie. He was a 3rd round pick, and he's just in a big spot. I have a lot of questions about this defense, so I just felt like I could have picked anywhere on defense, but they're at least doing the offseason talk, and maybe because they don't have any other options to play at that spot, but he's probably starting opposite Patrick Surtain, which means like if you watch Broncos games, you can probably expect a lot of Riley Moss targets to happen.
It's very funny. I'm just looking at Riley Moss to see what kind of headlines there are. Okay, so I also went defense. It's a really ragtag group. I went with Baron Browning just because I think he's a good player. When I think who on this team could be a difference maker, he is one who jumps out to me. He was injured last season. Really. And, you can go Cooper also. I know that, he's showed stuff, but Browning, I think, is probably the highest upside pass rusher on this roster, in my opinion, based on his play thus far. Neither of us went offense, even though they have a rookie quarterback, which is kind of interesting.
When I look at their offense, I'm like, who's the guy that is going to pop here? Who's going to make or break their offense? And I don't know. I know who Cortland Sutton is at this point. To me, he's not a make or break. And the rest, it's just a team. And I thought this about them going into last year, where it's like, tell me the good position group on this team. And there aren't a ton, they've got creditable players throughout the roster. It's not like the worst roster either, but there aren't many groups that you're like, oh, that's a difference-making group. So I think it was a hard one. They're kind of the least X-Factor team to me in the NFL.
We had a hard time ahead of the draft talking about, okay, this is what Bo Nix is walking into. I remember when we talked about the situations that each of these primary rookie quarterbacks are walking into. Who's the best? Obviously, Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy. Who is the worst? Well, question marks about the Pats and the Commanders. And the Broncos kind of just fell in the middle. I think it's some good. I ended up
slightly below average everywhere. The receiver group, a little below average. Not terrible, but a little below average. Offensive line, they're fine. The running backs, the coaching staff. You're getting a good offensive coach.
You have Sean Payton. Yeah, I think the offensive line is also pretty good.
They played well last year. I should point that out, and that happens with Sean Payton teams.
Okay, the Chargers. I feel like I've gone a while without going rookie. This to me though is rookie. It's not Joe Alt. It's Ladd McConkey, because Ladd McConkey is going to have to catch 1 million passes in this offense. And I kind of think he can. I'm very high on him. Anyone who's listened to my pre-draft podcasts has heard me rave about him on multiple counts. He has pretty big shoes to fill, as not just in terms of the volume of targets, but the type of targets that he's likely to get with Keenan Allen's departure, the kind of throws that Justin Herbert likes to make. I think he's capable of it, though. I really think he is so great off the line of scrimmage. He's so good at getting open quickly. He's a really good route runner. He's got good hands. He has pretty much everything but size and maybe top end long speed. So for me, if he is as good as I think he can be, I'm going to feel very good about the direction that this Chargers offense is going in.
Yeah, it's a great pick too. He just has to stay healthy, and there's no huge reason to believe that his struggles to stay on the field last year are going to be some chronic thing, but they need him. Cause you're right. I'm almost surprised at the relative Josh Palmer love. I don't know if it's love, but it's he can be a role player, but they need McConkey to step in a slot above him. This was another tough team. I struggle with this whole division, but I went J.K. Dobbins, which I know it's a running back coming off an Achilles. You can't expect that much early, but I do think the ceiling for J.K. Dobbins long-term, and maybe, again, this isn't until the playoffs or something like that when he's fully back or he looks good enough and they give him a long-term contract and becomes this guy. I just think he had special vision. I think he had special instincts. I think he does have a chance to be a great NFL running back, and he's just in such a great NFL running back situation where they're going to want to count on their running backs. And it's going to be Gus Edwards week 1, I would assume, but Dobbins is just much more talented, and I guess I'm not ready to give up on him despite a couple of big injuries.
Well, it would be very funny, by the way, if like after all this offseason talk, the Chargers come out slinging it. We're like Jim Harbaugh, ground and pound, Greg Roman, and Justin Herbert just comes out throwing a million passes. No, but I seriously doubt that. I think more likely than not, they are going to be a very run-heavy team.
I thought about going Christian Fulton, but I've been going too many random, just my favorite guys. Like, where are these dudes ending up in free agency? And they signed him, and he's probably going to start. I was just like, okay, he might be interesting there.
I did not know Christian Fulton was on the Chargers until this very moment. If Dobbins is healthy, this should be one of the better rushing attacks in the NFL. Like, whatever you think about Greg Roman, man, that dude knows how to call a run game, a creative run game too. And this offensive line is very good, or should be if Alt is who we think he is. I think the presence of Herbert as a dual threat also is something that they'll tap into a little bit more in the backfield. So I'm excited to watch them run the football. Okay, there's one team left. This was I agree with you. The AFC West was difficult for me as well. I guess you go first for the Raiders.
Okay, I was choosing between 2 defensive players.
Me too.
I'm gonna go Jack Jones.
I have Jack Jones.
Okay. Like, is Jack Jones that dude? Like, is he a real dude? What a bizarre start to his career.
Yeah, I know.
So his last 6 games, if you just search by the last 6 games, PFF had him as like a top 5 corner. There was obviously that blowout game where he just made the insane interception against the Chargers. But I thought the talent was there, and that he was awesome as a rookie with the Patriots. I thought he was going to be an ascending big-time player for them, but he had a team suspension. He had a gun charge that was later dropped, but got him cut from the team. There was also a legal issue in college, so there was just a lot going on there, and they cut him. And when he landed in Vegas, like, they sort of just like suddenly had their best cornerback on the roster off of waivers and maybe like a high-level starter. It's kind of bizarre. The
interception he had in the Chargers game is one of the best interceptions I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
Like, I want to go back and watch it now. Again,
it's one of my favorite plays, and
unbelievable.
He made some plays as a rookie too on passes defensed and intercepted with the Patriots. It was just like, wow, this guy is special. You kind of can't teach what he has.
The ceiling, this is why I chose him, is the highest of any DB on this roster. And the reason I went defense is I was thinking about, like, hey, what does success look like for the Raiders? I think we're obviously we're pretty low on the quarterback position there. I think you want to see them build on what they did defensively last year, which is arguably why Antonio Pierce is head coach of this team. This is a defense that finished 4th in weighted DVOA.
That's wild.
Behind the Ravens, the Jets, and the Browns, the teams we think of as having elite defenses, ahead of the Niners, the Cowboys, the Steelers. Like, that's pretty shocking. And when I look at the depth chart, as I did to do this, I think it's a very good front now. Obviously, you got Christian Wilkins, so it's likely to become even better. See them play with light boxes the way Miami did with Wilkins. But corner is it's the single biggest question mark outside of quarterback on this roster. Because after him, you've got Jacorian Bennett, Nate Hobbs, who's a good nickel, safety, Merrick, Marcus Epps. But if Jack Jones can continue playing like that, this could be a really good defense. And if we're talking about this team at the end of the year, I think that would be why.
Yeah, he just seems like an Antonio Pierce guy. Antonio Pierce in general just seems like he's going to get all of his defensive players to play their like brains out. I mean, he was getting linebacker play that he earned that job.
Malcolm Coots went crazy.
Right, Malcolm Coots was my other choice, was my backup choice, like, because he went crazy at the end of last year. It doesn't feel repeatable. Like, the logical take here is that Antonio Pierce is not that good that he's going to lift this talent to a top 5 defense again. But it was it was so special at the end of last year that you give it a chance. And I kind of like that they kept him to find out.
Yeah, I mean, the case for it is the addition of Wilkins. You get more play out of Tyree Wilson, and then Jones. We're talking about Pierce, but if this defense continues playing anywhere close to that level, I think Patrick Graham, who's your defensive coordinator, I love that they gave him time to like figure things out, right? Because it was a disaster at the jump, and he was a guy who was being talked about as a head coach candidate. You remember when he was with New York, and I think he will be again if they play at that level. Thus concludes the AFC. Before we wrap, Gregg, I've been, when I remember, doing off-season content recommendations from some of my guests. It can be music, books, TV. You are a broad consumer of content. Is there anything you would like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend a book, my favorite book of the year, Martyr, ! Love a title with an exclamation point, by Kaveh Akbar. This is what it's like being friends with Mina. You recommend a book thinking you're all cool. Oh, this is my favorite one of the year to her. And she's like, oh yeah, I met him at a party. It's just like, how do you have so many friends and meet so many cool people? And so I kind of geeked out that you got to know him, but an incredible writer, like was a poet, and this is his first novel. I'm not going to give anything away, but just stick with it. There are a lot of surprises in it, like a beautiful book about a lot of things. Martyr by Kaveh Akbar.
Have you read Commonwealth by Ann Patchett? I just bought it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to recommend it because I haven't read. Okay, I'll hear you out separately about that. That's a very good recommendation. So for me, let me think. I finally finished Crook Manifesto, and I'm starting a new book, but I'm not far enough along to recommend it. Gosh, there's a few directions.
I also watched Challengers on VOD last night.
We finally watched Challengers. What'd you think?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I'm a huge tennis guy, so to give me like half Dawson's Creek, half like weird sexual tension, like European movie, and like half like deep tennis dive, I was into it.
I would like to recommend the Challengers soundtrack. That would be my recommendation. No, that is certainly something I would recommend. What I will recommend, I don't think no, I didn't talk about this. I tweeted about it. There's an article by Sam Anderson, who's one of my favorite writers, in the New York Times Magazine about the death of his older dog and how having a pet makes him think about mortality. It's an accompanying podcast from the New York Times. Both very beautiful. I also love the artwork that goes with the story, so you check it out in digital format. I thought it was absolutely excellent, so go check that out wherever you get your pods. And that thus concludes the AFC X-Factors. We will be back next week with Marshall Newhouse picking X-Factors in the NFC. Thank you, as always, to the producers of this show from Omaha Productions, Kirsten Subecki, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor, Jack Foster, for the work they do on this podcast. You can check it out on ESPN2 on Wednesdays. Also at youtube.com/@Mina Kimes. Please subscribe if you don't already. We also put some other content out there, and you can listen ad-free if you choose on Amazon Music.